Gather around as we spill the tea on cybersecurity. We're talking about the topic in a way that everyone can understand. I'm your host, Jara Rowe, giving you just what you need. This is the Tea on Cybersecurity, a podcast from Trava. You're tuning in to another episode of the Tea on Cybersecurity. We're still diving deep into what it takes to get a compliance certification. Over the last 2 seasons of the Tea on Cybersecurity, we've talked a lot about getting things in order to make it less likely for something to happen. But what if something were to happen? Who takes care of what? These are the types of questions we're going to be answering on this episode. We're covering the basics of incident response plans and tabletop exercises. But as we know, I'm not the expert. So I have my friend Christina Annechino with me to help us understand the role of tabletop exercises in the incident response process, addressing common challenges and their connection to compliance certifications. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Jara. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks.
In case this is someone's first episode tuning in, can you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Hi, so I'm Christina Annechino. I'm the cybersecurity analyst here at Trava. A lot of my responsibilities focus on leading some compliance engagements that we have, as well as providing technical support for our platform services. So I definitely have a lot of hats that I take care of, and I also run a lot of our incident response tabletop exercises. So I'm definitely ready to chat about them.
We're going to dive straight in. And I know we've talked about this in a previous episode, but just refresh my memory and the listener's memory. What is an incident?
An incident is an event that has been categorized to have an adverse impact on the protection of an organization, employees, or customer data, and then prompting a response or recovery process that would need to be enacted.
I think my brain is already putting it together, but I want the expert to answer. What is an incident response plan?
It's a document that has been approved by an organization's senior leadership team that's going to be detailing the procedural steps, the employee responsibilities, and any customer communication that's need to be adhered to when a security incident has been confirmed. The plan is typically reviewed on a cadence, best suited for an organization, or if the plan needs to be amended in any way.
So you started going through this a little bit, but what are things that are included in the plan in more detail?
So this type of plan, it should act as a set of instructions that are very clear and easy to follow should an incident occur. So having these instructions tailored to your organization's current infrastructure and security operations. So an effective incident response plan will minimize the impact and magnitude of an incident. That being said, some of the key elements that are mentioned are the levels of the incident severity. So this is going to dictate which steps need to be followed and how proactive the security team will need to be. The established lines of communication, so how the information will be passed to the other employees in the organization, chain of command, dictating the cybersecurity incident response team, when the plan should be activated. So this is going to be dependent on the risk classification assigned to each incident. Some other elements can include having the scope detailed out, which would state the overall goal, as well as establishing training and testing. And having this set up can be really helpful for your employees.
You mentioned that you help some of our customers go through this process. So what tips would you give someone that's forming an incident response plan?
Especially if this is the first time an organization is creating a plan like this, the focus should really be working on it piece by piece so as to not be overwhelmed. So start out small. What are the designated roles and responsibilities that you have? Then determine how the plan can best fit your needs. This can be done by assessing what types of incidents are most detrimental to your organization. So maybe an incident stemming from a compromised login would be more pertinent compared to encountering for instance, supply chain attack. You'll want the procedural steps definitely to reflect what you need to do in a real-world scenario. Keeping that in mind, though, the incident response plan should be flexible to handle multiple types of relevant incidents should they occur.
Each incident response plan is just general, and then you tweak based on the risk severity?
Yeah, absolutely. As well as what incidents would be most relevant to you.
So how does having a robust incident response plan contribute to overall risk management?
First, what do we mean by robust? A more robust plan is going to assess all possible threat actors and incidents. It will have a consistent and repeatable action layout used across a very wide range of conditions. So these plans align employees with the written out processes and present technology that are currently implemented in an organization. For risk management, this is going to heighten the level of response for the threat analysis and mitigation portion. It will also aid senior management in identifying the explicit level of risk associated with whatever incident severity may be assigned.
How do incident response plans contribute to maintaining security and annual certifications for like a SaaS company?
In creating an incident response plan for SaaS companies, it's really possible to have a more structured method for protecting SaaS applications and critical SaaS data, which is really what we need. Because ultimately, you're displaying how your data and software is secured within this plan. For instance, some elements of the plan can include managing misconfigurations or compliance breaches. And then by reviewing and testing the plan, it can be submitted for annual recertification to remain compliant with whatever framework you've chosen.
Through my own research and understanding more about this whole compliance process and things, I've learned that there's a lot of overlap with incident response plans and tabletop exercises. Could you briefly explain what a tabletop exercise is and how they fit into the incident response planning process?
When a tabletop exercise is really an interactive discussion-based session where members of an organization's security, engineering, and/or IT teams will run through and validate the contents of their plans. So whoever is facilitating the exercise will present a real-world scenario where the team will go over their current processes and procedures reflective of what's documented in their plans. This should be very informal and facilitate a lot of back and forth to get the most out of the exercise and really identify any and all of the gaps in what you have documented should something happen if the plan would need to be activated. This can really help with an incident response planning process because if there are any areas where an organization is lacking in how they react to emergency situation, they're going to be identified during the exercise and then corrected afterwards.
How often should a company conduct a tabletop exercise?
Here at Trava, we recommend it to be conducted on a yearly cadence. For some organizations, it may be more relevant to do it on a quarterly basis, definitely after any infrastructure changes have been implemented, but whatever is best suited for the organization. But our recommendation really is on a yearly cadence.
What common challenges do organizations face during tabletop exercises? And then how do these exercises contribute to better decision making?
How prepared an organization is for the exercise can sometimes make it a bit challenging. If the team on the call isn't familiar with the designated steps outlined in the incident response plan, not only will the plan need to be reviewed, but it'll also need to be tested again to verify its accuracy and effectiveness. So Trava conducts tabletop exercises, and whenever we face something like this, we always want our customers to feel comfortable. So we provide guide questions and a recommended course of action to keep the conversation flowing. I would say it would be the main challenge that I've seen so far. Of course, it's always important to have the right team members on these calls, the initial point of contact designated, as well as someone from leadership to oversee the exercise.
I know that there's a lot of overlap with all of this stuff with compliance, and these are important tasks that you need to do to become certified. So how can organizations ensure that tabletop exercises effectively address compliance-related aspects?
The answer here, it's ultimately setting a designated time frame for reviewing the complete plan and proving that it's been determined to be up to date. So some frameworks, such as NIST, will mandate that tabletop exercises be performed on a specific schedule or frequency, organizations that handle sensitive data.
Can you go into a bit more detail about the role of tabletop exercises in preparing for audits and compliance readiness?
So a well-designed tabletop exercise is going to validate the controls of a specific security framework you're aiming to be compliant with. The scenario that's chosen can be tailored to test if an incident response plan adheres to those compliance requirements. Not only can a tabletop exercise test and validate your current incident response plan, but it's also going to ensure that you're aligning with what you need in order to pass an audit.
Are there specific compliance standards that stress the importance of regularly testing and updating incident response capabilities? I feel like you were just answering that with NIST, but I would love to learn more.
For SOC 2, you're required not only to test your incident response plan, but your business continuity and disaster recovery plans as well. Others include PCI DSS and ISO 27001. It's quite common to need to conduct regular testing on your documented plan. So we've seen this across a bunch of different standards. Displaying how your organization conducts ongoing monitoring on an incident response plan will also satisfy any compliance requirements and streamline the process of becoming certified. Just wanted to point that out.
During compliance audits, how do organizations demonstrate that they have a functional incident response plan in place?
During the incident response tabletop exercises that Trava runs, we actually go over all the necessary steps to ensure that an incident response plan is number one, effective, and number two, aligns with what we see that's necessary in undergoing successful compliance audits. So some of these steps that we cover actually include the overall preparation of the plan, detection and analysis that's performed by the security team, the organization's strength in containment and eradication and recovery, and any post-incident activity that should be reported.
We've talked a lot about, well, we've mentioned documentation and things like that. So, what does the documentation actually look like for like incident response plans and tabletop exercises?
The overall documentation structure can vary. It really doesn't need to follow an exact template. So the documentation is really going to outline what we covered today and what we mentioned.
I've learned a lot. Definitely need to take a second to digest some of this information, but is there any other thing that you would like to point out about this process?
I really want to highlight you don't have to have a perfect incident response plan right off the bat. That's the point of going through tabletop exercises. It really should alleviate the pressure and answer any questions you might have as to what should be covered in your plans. So you really don't have to have a perfect incident response plan right off the bat. That's really the point of going through these tabletop exercises. It should alleviate the pressure and answer any questions you may have as to what should be covered within your plans. At Trava, we run many tabletop exercises for our customers. And in my opinion, there can always be improvements, but really that's the point of testing the effectiveness of your plans.
So helpful. And I know that the listeners learned just as much as I did as well. If any listener has any follow up questions, don't be afraid to reach out to me, and I will make sure that Christina or another Trava team member gets our answers. So thanks so much, Christina. I appreciate your knowledge.
Of course, love being here.
Thank you. Now that we've spilled the tea on incident response plans and tabletop exercises, it's time to go over the receipts. And boy, was that tea hot that Christina spilled. Christina dropped so much knowledge on incident response plans and tabletop exercises. I have a lot of receipts to go over with you. The first one that I have is, what is an incident? It's an event that actually takes place and that something harmful were to happen. In a previous episode with Christina and Marie, we talked about the difference between a breach versus an incident. And a breach is if the bad guy got in where they're not supposed to, but then the incident was like if the bad guy got there and did something harmful with the information or something like that. So, what is an incident response plan? It's just a set of instructions that need to be followed if an incident were to take place. Christina also mentioned that the plans, these incident response plans, can be general. Like you can just have one plan and tweak it along the way based on like risk classifications and other things like that. So then Christina also talked to us about tabletop exercises. And these are just like an interactive session where an incident response plan is walked through with the people that have tasks and responsibilities in that plan. So if something were to happen, we have at least practiced what to do. I asked Christina how often a company should conduct a tabletop exercise. And she did say that it depends on several different things. But at Trava, we recommend that our customers do it at least yearly, which also lines up with a lot of the different compliance frameworks. But Christina also said that it should be done if there was an infrastructure change as well. So if a team member that has responsibility on the plan were to leave, it's important to then practice with the person that now steps into that role. And the final receipt I have for you on this episode was about tips on creating an incident response plan. Christina talked about how a lot of people get overwhelmed and they want it to be perfect from the beginning, but that's not necessary because that is the point of a tabletop exercise is to go through it and be able to tweak things as needed. Christina suggested when creating the incident response plan to start small and just focus piece by piece so that you're not overwhelmed. Well, listener, that wraps up the compliance segment of the T on cybersecurity. I hope that you all have a better understanding of the different elements that you must go through during the compliance certification process. But the T on cybersecurity isn't going anywhere yet. We are still going to dive deeper into general cybersecurity things. So I'll see you soon. And that's the T on cybersecurity. If you like what you listen to, please leave a review. If you need anything else from me, head on over to Trava Security. Follow wherever you get your podcasts.